I knew the moment was coming the second he pulled out the damn stool. Not a chair, a stool, like some twisted motivational speaker on LinkedIn trying to sell us grit with a side of layoffs. VP Trevor, all 30-something years of tech bro smug, hops up like he's about to deliver the Sermon on the Mount. Instead, he adjusts his lavender tie, grins like a man who's never faced a real firewall and says, "We're modernizing, trimming legacy code and legacy roles." The entire room shifted. I felt the weight before he even looked my way. The silence thickened like static before a storm. Then he said it, like it was a joke that had already landed in his own head. Some of us just aren't scalable, especially when you're still using tech older than Google. Elise, thank you for your service. Your offboarding starts today. No warning. No private conversation. Just humiliation in 4K, broadcast over Teams to every regional office. The room didn't gasp. No one ever does in real life. Instead, they blinked, shifted, pretended to check Slack. And I didn't flinch. I stood, smoothed my blouse, walked toward him slow, deliberate, like I was trying to remember the weight of each year I'd given this company. Then I reached into my bag. His eyes tracked my hand like I was drawing a weapon. In a way I was. I held up the root access security dongle. The only one. The one I'd built infrastructure around for over 17 years. Secure enclaves, vault clusters, CI/CD integrations, and biometric escrow backups all mapped through that very device. The CTO, Jeff, was already pale. Trevor just looked confused, like I was waving a car key at a horse. I said nothing. Just gave him a long look, a look reserved for boys who mistake confidence for competence. Then I walked out. No exit line, no dramatic pause. Just the click of the door and the echo of scalable, still bouncing around the room. That moment cost them nothing to deliver, but it'll cost them everything to undo. And before we go further, just a quick second. If you're listening to this and haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. 97% of you don't, and it seriously helps the team behind these stories when you hit that little like or follow. Alright, back to the chaos. By the time I reached the parking lot, my badge was already deactivated. Cute. But they forgot one thing. Corporate IT doesn't own the infrastructure. I do. They never learned the full map. Trevor thought legacy meant obsolete. He never asked why there was only one root credential. By lunch, the office Slack was buzzing with minor sync issues. By dinner, the first alert came in: token expiration anomaly, pipeline delay. They thought it was a fluke. They hadn't even seen the start. By the time they realized I wasn't in the system anymore, I was already halfway through replanting my herb garden. Mint, rosemary, a stubborn little basil that never took. Unlike me, it needed constant warmth to stay alive. I, on the other hand, had learned to thrive in cold environments. 17.5 years in a company where people got laid off via calendar invite? You grow calluses in places you didn't know existed. No exit interview. No handover form. No documentation request. They didn't even ask for the dongle back. I watched them trip over their own arrogance like toddlers with scissors. Badge? Disabled. Email? Redirected. But root credentials? Still humming along in my pocket. Because they never understood what I actually did, they just saw senior systems architect and assumed I managed Jira boards and talked about Agile in one-on-ones. Back inside, little things were already breaking. A junior engineer, bright kid named Owen, flagged a sync delay between the CI staging environment and the production deploy queue. Token handoff misfired. Rollback script froze mid-cycle. Nothing catastrophic, just weird. He posted it in the #ops channel with a timestamp and a confused shrug. The CTO, Jeff, saw it. Didn't say anything in chat. But later that afternoon, he pinged legal. Quietly. Asked if my termination had gone through full separation, IT clearance, infrastructure handoff, root credential transfer, escrow update. I imagine the reply was something like a blank stare in Outlook form. Trevor? He laughed when Jeff brought it up in the Tuesday exec sync. She was just legacy baggage, he smirked. You're not seriously worried about someone who still used bash scripts, are you? Legacy baggage. The woman who built their infrastructure spine thread by thread, in a time before their UI even had a dark mode. The one who ran disaster recovery tests while they were still arguing over which project management tool to buy. The one who locked the vault so tight even the auditors needed my help to peek inside. I wasn't offended. I was entertained. You could feel the tension start to build, like humidity before a thunderstorm. DevOps lead asked about rotating service tokens just in case. Someone else noticed a failure in the backup to cold storage sync. The token didn't refresh. Scripts had my name hard-coded as a failsafe. They started asking, did anyone get Elise's notes on the vault handoff? Silence. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all felt it. I wasn't just gone. I had taken something with me. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a finger. Not yet. It happened at 2:17 p.m. on a Wednesday, because of course disasters don't wait for the dignity of a Monday morning or the mercy of a Friday afternoon. They hit midweek, mid-deploy, when no one's paying enough attention and everyone's convinced the systems can fly themselves. The cloud deployment was for a long-time legacy client, one of the few who'd stuck around through 3 rebrands and 2 failed acquisitions. Their quarterly rollout was supposed to be seamless, just a minor update to their private dashboard integration. Standard stuff. It had gone through staging without a hiccup. But when they hit the go button for production, everything stalled. Pipelines halted. Containers froze. Automated rollback triggered. And failed. First came the engineering pings. Anyone else seeing this? Rollback not executing. Prod freeze, requesting manual override. Slack lit up like a Christmas tree. The DevOps lead tried rerouting through an alternate pipeline. No dice. The system kicked back a credential error he'd never seen before. Permission denied, node ownership unverified. And that's when it got interesting. They opened the Vault dashboard. Core automation modules were locked. Access logs showed a last modified timestamp dated 6 months prior by me. Attempts to override failed. Even Jeff, the CTO, couldn't get in. The master credential chain had a break. Specifically, in the biometric escrow system, the same system I designed, configured, and crucially never fully handed over. Jeff, looking like a man trying to remember whether he'd left the stove on, finally asked the right question. What path did Elise use for emergency overrides? Silence. Owen, the junior engineer, searched my archived mailbox. That's when he found it. A short email dated 4 days before the layoff. Subject: Escrow Transfer Checklist. Ensure biometric escrow is initiated before final transition. Root-dependent nodes will remain locked without multi-auth chain registration. Let me know once confirmed. No one had replied. No one had even opened the document attached. Because no one thought they'd need it. Trevor had already made up his mind by then. Said we'd be simplifying stack ownership. Said the team needed fresh eyes. Said I was too embedded in the old way of thinking. Now they were staring at a black box with no keys and no idea how deep the locks went. A system designed to protect from internal and external threats alike. Now sealed shut, behaving exactly as intended. The panic wasn't loud yet. It was quiet. Like that feeling when you lose something you didn't know you needed until the moment it's gone. You could see it in the way people paused between Slack messages. In the unusually long stares at deployment logs. In the subtle change of Jeff's voice when he called legal again and said, "We may have a bigger problem than we thought." And still no one had called me. Which was smart. Because I wouldn't have answered. The war room smelled like burnt coffee and thinly disguised panic. Every monitor was lit up with dashboards, failed deploy logs, terminal windows blinking like Morse code for, "You're screwed." The engineers sat hunched in hoodies and startup t-shirts, furiously typing commands they already knew wouldn't work. At the head of the room, Trevor paced like a man auditioning for a leadership TED Talk. Except his voice kept cracking. "This is an engineering failure," he snapped. "You're telling me none of you thought to map out a fallback path? This is basic system continuity. What do we pay you for?" A few glares, some stiffened backs, but no one said it out loud. You fired the one person who knew where the map even was. Jeff stood at the whiteboard, arms folded tight, staring at a cluster of hand-drawn rectangles labeled things like Vault Node C2 and Root Credential Tree obsolete. He wasn't scribbling anymore. He was just holding the marker like it might help him reverse time. "Where's the dongle?" he finally asked, low and deliberate. Silence. "The root access dongle. The physical key Elise used. Anyone know where it is?" No one did. Because it was in my coat pocket, sitting on the entryway table next to my dog's leash and a half-eaten banana muffin. That's when legal stepped in. Quietly, almost apologetically. Some poor contract attorney with a laptop full of compliance timelines and no authority to stop what was coming. We're entering the final 72-hour window for DR compliance, she said. If this isn't resolved by then, we'll fail our self-cert attestation. That triggers the federal audit clause in the master-client agreements. Trevor blinked. What audit clause? Her laptop rotated toward him with one sentence highlighted in yellow. Clause 4.3. In the event of credential ambiguity or node inaccessibility extending beyond 72 hours, full recovery documentation and chain of custody logs must be submitted for review. It hit them like a cold front, because that documentation didn't exist. Not fully. Not in any complete form. Pieces were in confluence, sure. Bits and fragments. But the full chain, the root decryption paths, the vault transfer steps, those lived in my head. And in one document I'd sent months ago that got filed under to-do once budget clears. A senior engineer, maybe 10 years younger than me, finally asked it. Who owns the recovery keys? Nobody answered. Because nobody could. Trevor tried to pivot, tried to sound in control. This is sabotage. She planned this. Jeff didn't bite. He just looked down, then muttered. No. She protected the system. We just never learned how. You could feel it shift. The fear wasn't abstract anymore. It wasn't about the system crashing. It was about the audit trail, the investor fallout, the lawsuit waiting to materialize the moment one of their biggest clients realized their data pipeline had been hardlocked by a ghost. And through it all, my exit, the calm silence, the quiet walk, the raised dongle, suddenly didn't look like resignation. It looked like a warning, one they were too arrogant to hear. At 8:42 a.m., the CFO's dashboard went dark. Not a crash, worse. It loaded just enough to remind you it used to work. Then came the spinning icon, the login timeout, the vague error code no one could trace. Node validation incomplete. Vault signature expired. 9 minutes later, the sales ops dashboard blinked out. Then the client metrics portal. By the time legal's contract archive failed to load, someone finally said what everyone else was thinking. Is this an attack? But it wasn't outside forces. It was the system doing exactly what I built it to do. Lock down root-level processes when the biometric escrow expired without renewal. A chain reaction. Like watching your house slowly seal every exit while you hold the wrong set of keys. Then the big one hit. The main CI/CD pipeline, the artery for every deploy, every rollback, every client patch, coughed once, then flatlined. Build tokens expired. The refresh daemon choked trying to contact the vault. Jenkins jobs queued and never launched. Product managers started calling engineers directly, bypassing Slack, barking questions they couldn't answer. Why aren't updates going out? Where's the patch? Is this a 0-day? By 10:11, someone finally fired off an email to the OPSOL list. Subject: Can someone find Elise? Nobody. Just those 6 words. The CTO, poor Jeff, looked like he hadn't slept. He sat at his desk with 3 monitors going, sifting through archive system logs like they were tarot cards. That's when he found it. Buried deep in a subfolder tagged deprecated user notes was a log entry he hadn't seen in years. Root for grant. Timestamp 6 months ago. Trigger type: biometric vault expiration. Contingency state true. He stared at it like it had personally betrayed him. That lock wasn't an accident. It was a backup layer. One I'd installed after the second ransomware scare 2 years ago. Trevor had called it paranoia. I called it engineering. Now, the system had reverted to that fallback state because the primary credential owner, me, was never replaced. And that's when Trevor lost it. He slammed into the glass wall of the war room, eyes wide, voice cracking from a mix of rage and fear. Get her back here now, he shouted. I don't care how, call her, subpoena her, pay her, threaten her, just fix this. Jeff didn't move. He just looked up slowly and said, You fired her, remember? You could feel it, the fracture in Trevor's whole facade. The room didn't fear him anymore. They feared the system, and the woman who knew it better than anyone alive. But I was nowhere near the building. I was sitting on my porch with a cup of tea, watching my neighbor's cat try to hunt a squirrel twice its size. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I let it go. Then a second time. Then 3 in a row. Then silence. They were starting to understand. It wasn't revenge. It was architecture. The federal audit team showed up at 9 a.m. sharp on Thursday. 3 people in dark suits with rolling bags, lanyards that meant business, and faces that suggested they hadn't smiled since the Obama administration. It was a routine quarterly check, one of those bureaucratic rituals companies usually ace with a mix of polished dashboards and caffeinated interns feeding them sanitized access logs. Except this time the dashboards were down, the logs were broken, and the intern was crying in a phone booth. The lead auditor, a woman named Chandler with the energy of a disappointed headmistress, opened her laptop and began the dance. We'll start with credential verification and vault key redundancy, she said. Please pull your disaster recovery access chain and show us the last successful handoff. Silence. The CTO glanced at legal. Legal glanced at IT. IT looked at the floor. Should take just a moment, Jeff lied. His voice cracked halfway through. While the audit team waited, they casually asked to see biometric logs for root-level access over the last quarter. An analyst from InfoSEC, sweat already soaking through his collar, hesitated, then plugged in a backup drive and filtered the entries. Name after name scrolled by. E. Grant. E. Grant. E. Grant. Over and over. My credentials hadn't just been present. They were the only ones maintaining active root-level operations. Log rotations, token handoffs, vault entry confirmations, even a heartbeat ping from the CI/CD redundancy node. All of it tied back to me. One of the auditors leaned forward, squinting. Miss Grant hasn't logged any offboarding event, he said flatly. There's no successor credential. Where is she now? Jeff looked like someone had poured ice water down his spine. She was terminated last week. A pause. Not dramatic, clinical. And the vault transfer protocol? That's when it broke. His voice dropped to a whisper barely audible. She never offboarded. We never transferred ownership of the vault. The phrase hung in the room like mold. No one moved. The auditors exchanged glances that said everything. Violation. Exposure. Breach of process. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't need to. One just tapped quietly at her keyboard, then asked, "Can we get a copy of the last DR chain update? The one showing multi-auth compliance and escrow fallback." Jeff couldn't even answer. The attorney beside him finally stepped in. "We'll need a moment." But they didn't have a moment. The federal system's compliance clause has no gray areas. Vault keys must be transferable within 72 hours of role departure. Access control must be redundantly documented. Biometric triggers cannot be tied solely to terminated personnel. They had broken all of it. Not through malice. Through negligence. Through ego. Trevor, for his part, hadn't even shown up that morning. Word was, he'd gone off-grid after his screaming fit the day before. Probably holed up in his overpriced condo, wondering why none of his quick-fix consultants were picking up. Meanwhile, downstairs, the panic was blooming. Legal started calling insurance. Internal audits scheduled an emergency briefing. The word liability got passed around like a live grenade. And the ghost in the system? Still logging heartbeat pings. Still locked. Still mine. I wasn't even trying to hurt them. I just built a machine that required respect to function. They chose arrogance instead. By noon, the word lawsuit was bouncing off every glass wall in the building like a racquetball on Adderall. The audit team hadn't left yet. They were now pulling deeper logs, requesting backup snapshots, wanting to know why key disaster recovery files hadn't been updated since fiscal Q2. A junior analyst from risk management vomited into a trash can after an auditor pointed out that one of the vault handoffs listed a dead contractor as the backup credential owner. Trevor came in late. Sunglasses indoors, jaw clenched like he'd been grinding teeth all night. He strutted into legal like a man ready to slap the problem with a restraining order. Slapped his hand on the table and said, "Draft a cease and desist. She's sabotaging us." No greeting. No context. Just full chest thump desperation. The lead counsel, a patient woman named Sandra with exactly zero tolerance for toddler tantrums, didn't even look up. She just slid her glasses down her nose and said, "Cease and desist what exactly?" Trevor blinked. "The systems." The access. She's holding us hostage. Sandra raised an eyebrow. You mean the infrastructure she architected, maintained, and which you terminated her from without triggering a knowledge transfer clause? He sputtered. She's weaponizing the system. Sandra didn't respond. Instead, she reached into a red folder on the table, pulled out a printed copy of my employment contract, flipped through about 15 pages and held up a stapled addendum, initialed and date-stamped 6 years ago. Infrastructural root ownership waiver, she read aloud. Reversion to architect upon termination without knowledge transfer. Trevor squinted at the document like it was written in Greek. What the hell does that mean? Jeff, standing in the corner, finally stepped forward. It means she's not holding the system hostage. He paused, then held up a second document, the node map printout I built during the last system overhaul. A spiderweb of access tiers, credential routes, vault triggers, and root fallback logic. It all traced back to one thing. The dongle. My dongle. Jeff pointed to the central node, labeled root for that grant. She's not breaking the system, he said. She is the system. For the first time since I'd left, Trevor said nothing. No bravado. No sarcasm. No smirk. Just a slow collapse of every lie he'd told himself about control. He dropped into a chair like the air had been sucked out of him, stared at the document as if it might spontaneously combust and save him the humiliation of reading it twice. Legal didn't gloat. They didn't need to. The company hadn't just lost control of its infrastructure. It had never owned it to begin with. I just let them borrow it on the condition they respected it. And me. They failed on both counts. And now they were about to pay for it. I was wrist-deep in potting soil when the call came through. Early October sun warming my shoulders, dahlias swaying slightly in the breeze, my hands caked in dirt and lavender mulch. I didn't check the screen. I knew it wasn't a spammer. Spammers don't call twice. This number had called 5 times in a row and finally had the good sense to leave a voicemail that just said, Elise, it's Jeff. Please, call me. So I did. I didn't bother washing my hands. Just tucked the phone between my shoulder and ear while I pried a root ball loose from a cracked ceramic planter. Jeff, I said calmly, like I wasn't standing on the edge of burning Rome, watching it from my garden like a woman who finally realized she never needed their kingdom in the first place. He sounded older. That kind of tired that seeps into the cartilage of a man who just realized the future he bet his career on is built on a locked vault he can't open. Elise, I know you don't owe us anything, but I need to talk to you. Please. I didn't ask how bad it was. I already knew. He hesitated. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. Trevor was acting unilaterally. I didn't know about the termination until it hit Slack. I said nothing. We didn't follow offboarding protocol. Legal found your waiver. You were in the right. He exhaled. The whole company's frozen. Auditors, clients, the board, they all want answers. Still silent. Elise, he said gently, I need your help. I placed the cracked planter down on the ground and straightened. Then I said what I'd been waiting to say. Not with bitterness, not with triumph. Just truth. It wasn't sabotage, Jeff. I followed policy. You didn't. He paused. Let that settle. Then asked the question he'd clearly rehearsed. Is there a way back in? Something you can do? I didn't draw it out. No theatrics. I'd already made up my mind days ago, maybe years ago. There's a way, I said. I reinitialize vault access under vendor control. Migrate root credential authority to a managed service. I'll configure transitional logins, rekey expired tokens, and rebuild the CI/CD credential tree. He let out a long rattled breath like he'd just been pulled back from a cliff. But not for free, I continued. I'll do it under contract. Through Root and Thorn Systems LLC. That's my firm now. 5-year exclusive lease. Infrastructure management, credential access, vault admin. All under my terms. He didn't argue. Didn't blink. Just asked, what's the price? $250,000 retainer. Upfront. Monthly support structure based on node count. Non-compete clause for infrastructure rebuild using any derivative of my prior configurations. A beat of silence. Then simply, understood. I'll send over the contract by morning. I said. The rest is just business. I didn't hang up angrily. I didn't smirk. There was no need to punish him. He wasn't the problem. He was just the man who stood too close to it without speaking up. Now he was the one left holding the fire hose. I ended the call, tucked the phone back into my pocket, picked up my trowel and went back to the soil, because the truth is I hadn't built that system to fail. I built it to last. They were the ones who forgot what it was made of, and now they'd pay to remember. The board meeting happened on a Sunday morning. Not out of urgency, out of shame. They didn't want press or whispers, or some junior associate from accounting overhearing the death rattle of their control echoing through the glass conference room walls. No catered breakfast, no suits. Just 5 people in polos and cardigans, sitting around a table like mourners at the world's most expensive funeral. The VP's chair was empty. Word had it he resigned effective immediately, late Friday night after legal informed him he may have personally violated 3 sections of their federal compliance charter. His office had already been cleared. Desk empty, monitors unplugged, nameplate gone. No one mentioned him. No one needed to. Jeff sat at the head of the table, a man who looked 10 pounds lighter but 20 years older. He placed the signed lease agreement on the table like a relic. The logo at the top was clean minimalist, Root and Thorn Systems LLC. Underneath, a subhead in light gray, Vault Class Infrastructure Security. Reimagined. No one argued. No one debated terms. The company had no leverage left. 5-year exclusive infrastructure license. Monthly support tied to node count. Non-compete clauses. Vendor-managed escalation paths. Credential rotation on her schedule, not theirs. The deal wasn't a lifeline. It was a lease on everything they used to own but never understood. Jeff slid the signed copy into the folder. We're operational again, he said. Root tokens authenticated. Vault lockout resolved. CI/CD flow restored. Someone clapped quietly. No one smiled. They didn't ask me to return. They knew better. I watched the meeting on a muted video feed I was contractually entitled to access now. Thanks to Clause 4.2 of the agreement, vendor shall retain non-voting observational access to all security protocol discussions involving licensed infrastructure. Another little detail I'd slipped in while they were too busy panicking over broken dashboards. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. My inbox pinged around 2 p.m. with a welcome back email from HR. Addressed to Elise Grant, Strategic External Consultant. A token gesture. There was no parking pass. No badge. No office key. Just a silent acknowledgement that I had returned, but not to them. I didn't step inside the building again. I didn't need to. Instead, I updated my LinkedIn from the quiet corner of my garden, one hand still dirty with soil, the other holding a glass of iced tea. Elise Grant, Principal Architect, Root and Thorn Systems LLC, providers of Vault-class infrastructure security solutions. No fanfare. No victory parade. Just a quiet reclamation of what was mine. They cut me off. So I took Root. Now they rent the access I once gave away for free.